Welcome, friends. Adrian Sinclair over here, and today we're starting a new segment, which is conversations about interesting things and topics. And we're going to kick off this new segment by talking about data security and specifically how to deal with protecting files on your computer systems. So this is going to be an excellent episode for you to learn more about information security on your computer, whether you are a business or an individual who uses computers. One of the things that you constantly think about is, how do I protect my files, whether it's confidential information or if it's business proprietary data or customers' personal identifiable information, also known as PII. And today I invited a guest to the show who's a subject matter expert in this space, and he has a product that we're going to talk about later in the show that offers a solution to that. And I'm excited about bringing that to this segment. And without further ado, here's Alex Stieb, and welcome to the show, Alex. Thank you for joining us here, and we're going to kick off conversation about data security, file security. You've been operating in this space, and you have something interesting that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But let's start off with, what are you seeing as issues out there in the market that businesses face in terms of protecting data on their computers? A lot of companies have personally identifiable information of their customers, and when they delete those files, or if they dispose of computers that have those files and that information, how can they be assured that that information is deleted? And so, what do you see that businesses are faced with out there in terms of like protecting customer information?
Yeah. Hey. Thanks first off, having me on. Great pleasure there. And as far as like some of the big things, I think the biggest elephant that everybody's seeing is the coronavirus. Workflows and businesses have been so disrupted by this, and everybody was pretty much caught off guard in one way or another. Everybody was affected. Whether you're a large company, small company, and from that IT perspective, that it went kind of bonanza because everybody was so working off centralized workstations, having real close-knit IT managed structure, to now it's like everybody has to work from home on their home networks, geez, pulling some hairs out from the IT side, and it was a switch. It wasn't no gradual thing, so we're scrambling on to get things operational, to do work remotely there, having proper cloud setups, and that's got its own security flaws, and it's a constant scramble. Like, you look at things like Zoom calls, the Zoom bombing, and so many different things. It's still an ongoing process of trying to plug up all these holes, and then I'm sure we get this all solidified and kind of get to a good stable spot, something else is going to come along, and that's just kind of the world of IT. It's the ever evolving arms race there between the defenses and then the armament there.
Yeah, I'm excited about talking about this topic because I can totally geek out about data security and information security. And now everything is interconnected. Data lives in the cloud. It lives on your devices. It lives on your mobile device. It lives on your computer, your laptop, your tablet, all of that stuff, right? And so kind of getting a handle on that in terms of, once, let's say, you want to dispose of that information, delete it, and people think that if they just hit that delete button on a file and it disappears from your file explorer, and it's gone, and it really is not. So what's happening when you actually delete a file? When you hit that delete button and say, like, yes, I want to delete a file, is it gone, or what should people know about that you want to tell them about this?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. We'll take like one instance for example, because a lot of us work on, we're working with documents on like our laptops, or kind of more of like a tablet type laptop with the keyboard. That's where we're kind of typically doing a lot of different things. So when you're, say if you do delete a file, right, until the hard drive overwrites it or it's forced overwritten, all it's done is put into a hidden registry. So it's, you can still get it back, you can still recover it, and it's it's a very easy process too. I mean, you can go download some free software off the internet and pretty much recover anything that you've dropped in the recycling bin and just hit a delete button. So there's so many other hidden files too. It's not just necessarily that one file that you started with. You got your hidden files, your temporary files, your log files, your cloud storage backups, and all those different things. So it's never just like that one file that we're dealing with. I think we all kind of see that, and that's how we end up like, oh man, I didn't really use my computer that much, and now I have a terabyte hard drive that's completely filled up, and it's like, man, shoot, did I really download that many videos or whatever? But it's really all those hidden files that are causing a lot of that. So yeah, there's a lot to it that's people don't see beneath the surface. There, they see the beautiful surface, but there's a lot of complexity behind it. So
yeah, one way that someone explained this to me in the past, kind of like an analogy to a phone book, and I know for younger generations this is like a phone book. What the heck is that? But think of like even a regular book, right? You have information which is like the listings and everything, but then you have an index. And when you delete a file, what's typically deleted is just an index pointing to where that file sits on the hard drive or solid state drive or in memory or what have you. And so it's a sort of false sense of security that file is gone from your system. And in fact, only that pointer is deleted. And so like you mentioned, there's a bunch of different applications and software that will happily recover the data by looking straight into sort of like this phone book. And it's like, hey, look, I see all these files that are missing pointers in this index, and if you want me to recover them, I can just bring them to you and make it available again. And so there are a variety of different other solutions or ways that you can deal with deleting it securely, and a lot of them are software based. And actually there's even a standard, a military Department of Defense, DoD 5220.22-M. Of course, that's a government standard. It has to be neatly confusing and have a lot of numbers in it. But it is a sort of a forensic, or it's a wiping, it's a data file wiping standard, which basically it tells the software that it should override that space where your file is with zeros and ones and zeros and ones to kind of make sure that file is like completely destroyed, right? And so there's different ways of kind of dealing with that, right? And so why do you think, what are your thoughts on that, and why do you think, do you think there's issues with using software to delete securely the files that are on people's computers?
Yeah, I mean, there's some pros and cons to it. I mean, obviously, if you're in a closed system, such as military and government specs, and again, it's back in those centralized structures, it's great because you got everything contained. It's you can go through and overwrite things, and it's in a proper container to be able to do that. But then when you're starting to get outside of those networks, that becomes a whole nother challenge, because we have different ways of attacking computers, key logging, different phishing type attacks. So it's like you can even screenshot, like there's like robots that'll go in, take over computers and screenshot the computer as it's doing something. So it's these complex attacking mechanisms can kind of circumvent them if they're not in closed systems. So that's always a big challenge when you're dealing with outside that network. So when you're dealing with like a downloaded software, especially if it was off the internet, it's very easy to piggyback off of those, especially if you have like the IP address or where it's downloading to. It's very, very easy to tack something on. And you have no way of knowing it a lot of times, and that's why we see so many different attacks all over the place, and from email scams to you clicked on the wrong thing on the wrong website, and and most people don't know that they're there until their computer crashes, and so yeah, I mean the downloaded software has always had its challenges, and that's why we're starting to see sandboxing become more and more prevalent in Apple computers and some of these other softwares as well too. So that way it kind of compartmentalizes things. So they're less affected when they are downloaded and it has some kind of attachment along with it. It's only going to be very isolated damages that can occur there. So that's some of the different big things that I've seen as it's evolving in the market, that we're starting to compartmentalize even further and further within those operating systems, and continuing to develop that out so that way it's not as open to the whole thing to destroy everything that's in there, whatever the type of attack that we're dealing with. So
right.
So yeah, if that answers that.
It does. I'm just going to tack on my little spin on that, which is, in the era right now of sort of like everything free or a lot of stuff free, content is free, a lot of software is free, and people are like, well, let me just Google something, how to delete, files, and it's like, oh, look, here's a free application, and people just kind of take it for granted that it's just going to be free without any strings attached, and even if you do some due diligence in which you look at the software, maybe you download it, you scan it with antivirus software, right, and or you go to some sites that even give it a rating. There's CNET, there's download places where you can download the freeware, and they give you sort of like a sense of reassuring you that this software is fine, it's legit, and it's not going to it doesn't have any viruses or any additional things that are tacked onto it. But even then, you can't really trust it fully. Because it can be, there were instances in which sites were compromised, and legit sites, and then compromised software was uploaded, and people were downloading that stuff and then utilizing it. And that's kind of how a lot of these botnets are created, where a lot of people's computers are compromised and remotely controlled by whoever is owning that botnet, and then utilized for whatever nefarious use they have, and so it's very difficult to trust software. There are technologies like digital certificates that have tried to kind of provide another level of assurance that this software hasn't been modified. So we're talking about an integrity of software that you get, but even that has been compromised. And which is where you kind of mentioned, like for every system, for everything, there's going to be a counter thing, and then it's like this tit for tat and just kind of escalating warfare. For every system that's trying to protect, there's going to be something to compromise it, and then that escalates, again, anti that, and just kind of keeps on going up and up and up. So one of the things that so that's something that people should consider, that software it can be compromised. And so that takes us to stuff that we want to talk about, what can be done to kind of give us that higher level of assurance than the software that we just download to give us a little bit more, better sleep at night, that hey, my system is not compromised. We've heard all these stories now where hackers get into systems, they encrypt stuff, right, or they steal data, and then the company is liable for that. There's a bunch of laws on the books right now which mandate that companies protect the customer's data, right? The PII data, the personally identifiable information, which has, it could have like your social security, your phone number, your date of birth, all that stuff that then can be sold on the black market, and companies have to have assurances that if they do dispose of this data or they delete it, it is securely deleted, and so. What do you have? What's out there? What are you bringing into the table that allows to get customers and people that kind of level of assurance and safety in that space?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and you kind of brought up a good point too about just free software, even like the really legit software. It's like there's no such thing as a free lunch. We all know that. I think it's kind of inherent. Some of us kind of choose to ignore that it's, there's nothing that's free out there. If it is free, they're mining your data. So, that's one part of it, or they're attacking you. It's either way. They're coming after your wallet one way or the other, whether it's on the front door or the back door. So I mean, the biggest thing, like I personally do, and I recommend to anybody that I interact with about that, it's minimize your target. Because all big things that we see out there, they're going after the big fish, the big targets, because if there's they're going to put in a lot of work. It's like, what we do, if it's like, we'll just say take like a cyber attack in any way, shape, or form, they're out there working. This is their work. They're trying to make the biggest amount of money in a short amount of time as possible. So,
right.
If you look at it from a business perspective, they're not going to be spending a ton of time on a small fish that they might get, a couple $100, unless if they're trying to go after thousands of couple $100. So there may be smaller attacks, but if they're going after a big one, they're going to try to focus in on those really big targets so they can allocate all their energy to it. So really, doing everything you can possibly do, because again, there always is going to be constantly evolving, but trying to minimize your target with every resource in your tool belt that you have. Kind of offsite data storage that's not connected to the internet's a big thing. So it's like when we can remove this data that's really critical and sensitive and disconnect it from the internet, it makes it much harder for attackers to latch onto it. Because if you're always constantly connected, right, it's a whole lot easier to track you and find you, predict where you're going as far as on like your internet usage or your workflows. But if it's a constant disconnect and reconnect, you're interrupting that workflow, which is a lot harder to latch onto. And that's why, I think I've seen, VPNs, for better or for worse, they've become more popular because it's trying to scramble those IP addresses to make it harder to latch onto. But going back to it, it's the easiest way to do it. Just disconnect from the internet. If you disconnect, then nobody can connect. So if you can remove it, we went everything to the cloud, and I think the cloud has its own rights and everything, but it's like, sometimes it's just we're looking at these thumb drives, and these hard drives are getting so massive, you're getting terabytes. I still remember floppy disks was a thing, and it's like now we're being able to store a terabyte and something that fits in our pocket. That's insane amount of storage, and it's like, but very few people are utilizing that, and I think it's such a critical thing that if you can back it up and compartmentalize it on those drives, I think it's a huge benefit, from just that simple storage process, because obviously everybody has things that they need to store. I personally use those more if I got something very sensitive, whether appropriate, not necessarily inappropriate stuff or things that I'm looking to hide from people, but just things that are really important to me, family photos and things like that. I don't store them on the cloud. It's like I store them on an external hard drive that I can carry with me. I can put in the secure location in a safe that that's fireproof, fire resistant. So because if say if the cloud guy's server crashes, how am I going to get my photos back? I can't really do anything about that. But if I got it on an external hard drive, it's right there, ready to go whenever I want it. So that's like the disconnection and the disengagement, such a fundamental feature that I think we went away from, and I'm starting to see a little bit of that coming back in with some of these bigger companies starting to get that disconnect and reconnect engagement to help with their security systems. I think I saw Google and Amazon are starting to use a lot of the security keys instead of passwords. So not everything's all up in the cloud now. Now they actually have security keys that actually has to have that physical disengagement for them to access certain things and identify who they are. And I think that's the way that we're going to kind of rubber band back into that, is that we're going to start seeing the sandboxing of things, and then we're going to see these disengagement and re-engagement of the hardware and software integrations to really get things more secure.
Right.
So very, very highly compartmentalized.
And for those who don't know what security keys are and sandboxing, can you kind of just briefly talk about that to educate the audience who are not familiar with those terms? What does that mean?
Yeah, sure. We'll start with sandboxing. I kind of brought that one up a lot. Kind of think of like a kid's sandbox, right? Where it's literally a box with some sand. You can play in it, right?
Right.
And we're not getting outside that. And that's the really short and sweet, simple version of it. That we're not going to be spilling all the different pieces of that software outside of that box, and that's what's going to work within there. Here's like some parameter access that you can have. Here's a couple little tools and the shovel and the bucket that you can work with. That's probably the simplest way I can kind of put it. From a software, it's only allowing certain access to the operating system to allow that software to function on the OS, but it's not allowing it to access other applications that are on that computer. And so like if you're running we'll just say we'll take like a Adobe Photoshop or something like that. If it's sandboxed, Adobe Photoshop can only operate the operating system just enough to let that software run. It won't be able to access other applications unless you give it that specific permission to let it come over to the other sandbox. So it's just very, very compartmentalized. As I said, very much like you can play within your sandbox and that's it.
Right.
That's where that term came from.
Mm-hmm.
And then security key. Go ahead. You had another question?
No, the way I look at the sandbox is just a safe area where, if you think about it, like you said, it doesn't affect the outside, and you can kind of mess things up in that space, and then it's kind of easy reset where you can just kind of like, it's almost like just evening out all that sand in the sandbox and just prep the playground for another session where people can just where kids can play again, and they don't affect anything on the outside, and it's kind of like that compartment where it's a safe zone, it's a safe place, it's a place that doesn't affect the outside, and it's easy to sort of like reset and bring back to the default state. What are the security keys that you mentioned? What's that?
Yeah, security keys are, they've kind of always been around, but they become more prevalent as we've gotten into things. And like I mentioned, like some of the bigger companies like Google and Amazon are starting to that. I think Google issued them like 2 years ago, I think, if I remember reading that right, that they issued them all the employees. So those security keys in place of passwords, which we all know it's got like 1,000 passwords for everything under the sun, and we forget it. Then we got to go through the two-part authentication and reset that password and get the texting. And so it's kind of removing that two-part authentication process and being able to kind of compartmentalize it into an external device that has unique identification codes, and that's our password, right? It's no different than like a driver's license that, hey, I have a physical identification that this is who I am, and then you're trying to access something, instead of a password, you're having that authentication key, which is highly encrypted. That's it's almost impossible to duplicate without actually having the physical key present. So, when we talk about that encryption, this is like, you got your all your encryption data, and then you have your cipher key, and this is the cipher key that allows things to be unlocked, and then we know who unlocked it because it's your unique identification. And you want a replacement, there's no just quick little password reset. You have to get a physical device reset there. So it makes it much, much, much more challenging on lots of different levels to be able to copy and hack those different access points that we would typically use passwords for. So
right.
So that's where we see that prominence of disconnect and re-engage coming much, much more sophisticated.
Yeah, it seems like we're coming back to the era of having like physical hardware devices that are, and it kind of fits into the defense in depth kind of methodology, which is something that Department of Defense developed many years ago, which is like this layered approach where you have multiple things to protect the sort of like the soft and squishy inside of a company's information network on the inside, and having hardware stuff, which is like hardware keys, things that. So it's like not only what which is a password, right? Password or a secret phrase or something like that, but also something that you have. And that kind of goes into the two-factor authentication, meaning that you need multiple things in order to prove who you are before the system lets you access into the data or services. So that kind of goes into like having these hardware tokens and all sorts of different physical things that you must have in order to prove your identity, and it's going, I think, in that direction more and more because of the difficulty of proving the integrity of software on a lot of levels, right? Because software can be modified. Sometimes even stuff can be modified in memory in your computer. And you don't see the effects of that, and yet it can compromise your system and can compromise your data. So it seems like the industry is looking more and more into these hardware devices, which are harder, if impossible, to modify and compromise as easily as software.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, no, I agree with that with the hardware trying to, because it's almost like it's a own set of sandbox rules, right? You know, if you have if it's completely disengaged, this is a safe zone. So when it's, sandbox to sandbox, we're allowing, one set of hardware and software components to check itself, make sure that it's, what it's designed to do isn't doing anything but that, connected with another sandbox that's, designed to do what it's supposed to do, and that nothing but that. And then you can connect the two, and they're succinctly working independently from each other. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the, not only which way it's going, but it has to go if we want to keep things as secure as possibly, for the time being, until we get some radically new way of doing things. But like you said, it's tried and true methods that have been used in, different defense mechanisms, that layered approach that makes sure that we can authenticate what it's doing, why it's doing it, and, if you're allowed to be privy to that information. So, it's really the only way to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about hardware where there's a chip that controls something, and it's a physical thing that kind of like it can't step outside of its programming because it's hard coded, right? And that's what a lot of hardware solutions offer. They don't allow modification as easily, and some of them are just hardwired in such a way that you can't modify them at all. Of course, that comes in at a cost of flexibility, right? So if there's any updates or any changes or additional features that you want to add on, then you literally almost need a separate device. But there are hybrid solutions as well, where there's parts of it that are set in stone, and parts that can be modified and updated still. So there's kind of like maybe like a sweet spot. But let's go back to the data, and because that's kind of like the main thing for this conversation over here, the topic of protecting data and deleting data when you don't need it anymore, when you need to decommission something, right? Why is it so important to kind of have that assurance of deleting files and making sure that when you deleted it, the files are gone? And what are some of the challenges of that?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. Yeah, and I mean, we can kind of go back to that analogy of like the lessening our target, right? I think as all businesses have kind of come, especially if you're dealing with a little bit of that secure files, whether it's you're dealing with somebody's social security number, their home address, like kind of all that, their birthdays, whatever, we're getting into those things. We've gotten very, very accustomed to doing things like calling in companies to shred those documents after the appropriate times. We have those HIPAA compliant laws that mandate that we getting rid of things in a proper time frame, and making sure that we're not holding on to them. So it's an ongoing challenge, and everybody's dealing with it. If you're dealing with those client sensitive data, I mean, we deal with it, whether it's you're getting their credit cards. We see companies that aren't necessarily dealing with high level type amount of information, but just storing credit card information for ongoing transactions is becoming difficult. So it's like making sure we're always checking those things, and getting rid of them on a constant basis, so we're lessening our target, so we're less prone to attacks, and we're not the big guy that's not looking out for that blind spot that somebody can take advantage of. And if we're lean and we're agile and taking care of all the proper measurements, as best as we can, then it makes it a whole lot less easy for somebody to come break in the door. Right. You look at your own home, it's you get yourself a dog, you get yourself some security cameras, make sure you're equipping yourself, and it's like, oh man, they're going to go next. I don't want that guy because he's got all these things. And then you get to the guy that's got no security features, and he's posting on Facebook that he's going away on vacation, and for everybody to know, okay, cool, this is the guy I'm going now, easy low hanging fruit. So we don't want to be that guy that's posting everything on Facebook and has no backup and no security and no ways of defending ourselves, because it just makes you the easy target and the low hanging fruit. So when it comes to data deletion, that we want to make sure we're taking all the necessary measurements. See, when we are downloading those free softwares, checking the security settings, seeing what kind of data collecting, because you can opt in and out of it. It's your data, so you start with any kind of free software you use as a business perspective, do as best you can to minimize the amount of data collection that they're, and access to that data. That's the first step too, because you don't want just free flow of information. And then what you have left over, trying to offshore what you can, and if it happens to be the cloud service, make sure you're compartmentalizing those, and it's something that you're risk adverse enough that if it got out in the open, it's okay. Those things are okay to get out there, and it's perfectly fine. It's minimizing the liability and the risk. And then if it's super highly compartmentalized, I mean, you look at either home-based server type deal with your business, that you get up a secure server, secure backup storage, or if you're working with remote workers, then you have those kind of individually issued type like backup thumb drives or hard drives that can go from there. And then again, it's disconnecting by making sure that you're getting that data securely deleted, so it's not on something that's on an open network that's easily grabbable. So working with kind of that blank slate, kind of like we talk about the sandbox, like treat your computer like it's a sandbox. You're playing in it and using it for a period of time, and then trying to get everything off of it, so you're there's no target there for somebody to latch onto and hit. That's how I work. My laptop's pretty much, if you jumped onto it, the amount of data on there, if I left it on a street corner, I wouldn't care, because there's nothing on my computer really that I'm not looking to hold on to. I mean, you can literally take it, and it's not going to be any sweat off my back, because it's almost factory default setting, level. There's not very much, so it's all mitigated, separated, and then what's left over is securely deleted on an ongoing basis. So there's very little sensitive data on there. So if they want to be able to jump on there and get my email, I'm going to get a message on my phone, and it's going to tell me something he jumped on there, and I can lock it out real quick. So I'm making a lot of those different security mechanisms to be able to protect myself on all different levels. And that's where I say there's nothing left on my hard drive, because it's been securely overwritten on an ongoing basis if it's sensitive data. So it makes me very lean, very agile, less to think about on an ongoing basis. Right.
The deletion of files and secure deletion of files is in my opinion is particularly important when you dispose of hardware. Companies, even small companies, they do upgrades, they get new computers, and they typically will not destroy the old computers because they are still assets, right? So they sometimes they just sell it on eBay, and it could be not only computers, but like you have tablets, like everything that's a computer these days. I mean, even your printer is a computer. Your copier is a computer that has a hard drive that stores a lot of these scanned documents, right? So there's data is just prolifically spread out all over your even if it's a small mom and pop's network or a business, your data is typically all over the place. And so before you retire a piece of equipment, you want to make sure that you have that confidence that when you delete it, is truly deleted. And even if you format a hard drive with those, like you mentioned, cheap or free forensic tools out there, you can literally just download a CD or a image where they can start on your computer, and it will just run through. You don't need a lot of training to use that type of software, and it will literally just recover, even from a formatted hard drive. It will recover files very often. So it's very important to have that level of assurance so that your either personal data or your customer's personal data is not out there when you sell your old computer on eBay or donate it somewhere, and someone is able to recover that data and put your company at risk or put you at risk. Because nowadays a lot of business it's all about reputation, right? If someone's going to tarnish your reputation by exposing that, hey, this company didn't properly handle the customer data, that hit is like immeasurable. I mean, it can literally destroy a company, put them out of business. And so that's how I look at why is it important to make sure that your data is securely deleted, and And it's difficult to do, right? Because data lives in so many places. You have not only when you open up a file on your computer, it's not only the file that you open up. There's temporary files that open up somewhere. There's references in registry and many places that point to that file. There's backups. There's operating systems do a lot of interesting things nowadays when they try to help you out by making multiple images of your data, so that if you want to recover, if you want to roll back, the time machine on Apple operating system, and the same with Windows nowadays, they do that as well. So it's kind of difficult to track where you have all that stuff, right? And so what can be done to kind of help people out with this task, of deleting these files securely?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up some good points there. Particular instance, like, you talk about like a company having a laptop, right? You have employee turnover. That's a very, very, very prime example, because you may have had somebody that's been with you for 5 years or 10 years or whatever, and they're privy to a certain amount of information. So some of it's not even necessarily data hacks. It's just people within your own organization. They may not be, privy to certain information. So it's making sure we're going through and cleaning out those computers of all that data, using securely overwritten processes, so that way they're not running some override things, because there's nothing new under the sun about corporate espionage too. I mean, there's companies go back and forth with corporate espionage, or if they're just good intentioned people, and they're but you just want to make sure as a company you're putting the right information in the right hands and trusting your team. So you always want to go through and clean a computer out, making sure that everything's nice and tidy before you turn it over to the new team member, because we still got to build up that trust. We are humans, and it's not a instant thing to trust people, and we wish the best and we hope the best intentions when we hire somebody, and but at the same time, we have to protect our organizations as business owners, and make sure that we're doing our proper steps. It's that tried and true statement. It's trust but verify, right? We want to trust, and we put those things out there, but we also want to verify and compartmentalize, and then so we want to just mitigate those risks. And when you first hand over a computer, it's have it clean slated, make sure all that's been deleted, make sure it's got the proper overriding process based on where you're at. If you're military, obviously you're going to have your military specs, and if you're a local business, you can kind of get away with a little bit lesser standards, but you still want to do it on a securely overwrite, because again, you never know who's coming in that door until they've been with you for a while, and at least see how they operate and see what they're all about.
That's right.
Because So we always want to start with that clean slate on a computer and make sure it's always overwritten, so that there's no little back doors for people to come through. So that would be like my biggest thing, starting there on the team members. And then, like you said, getting rid of computers. That's even more of a loophole, because it's like we don't know who we're turning those laptops in, or those cell phones, or the tablets, or whoever. You can clean them out as best you think you can, and then you turn those in for recycling. It's like, for all somebody walking on the street just went through and picked up that, picked that out of the recycling bin that was, next to, different computer stores, and picked it up, took it home, and grabbed a whole bunch of data from it. Or I've read something here recently about car companies. We'll just leave it nameless, but they were selling off the hard drives for old cars that were no longer usable, and it's like all the customer data was on there. And it's really important to make sure we're protecting that data on all levels, and cleaning out those hard drives. Like you said, printers are a big one, laptops, cell phones, our cars, like all this data is all over the place, and trying to clear it out, minimizing that target, so we're the small room, so we're kind of flying under the radar when it comes to data. So we are definitely in that information age.
And data is just like so distributed now, in terms of a lot of processes are happening behind the scenes where things are being backed up, and there's multiple copies made, and again, this just kind of brings me back to this difficulty for a regular computer user who may not be as savvy in terms of sanitizing and cleaning, and then again, that's whether it's small business or a large business, it's a we create a lot of files and they live all over the place, and then just kind of tracking everything and deleting and making sure that it is really deleted when it's supposed to be deleted is just such an overhead that I'm sure just kind of translates into a lot of dollars if someone needs to be sort of like manually tracking and even learning how to do that. How to find out that all the instances of the file that of that Word document or a spreadsheet or whatever that you worked on are truly deleted when you needed it to be deleted. So this brings me to what you guys are working on at ShredCube, and that's why I'm so glad that you came on the show to talk about it, because you guys came up with a solution to deal with this. And tell me a little bit more about it. Why should people use ShredCube, and what you're offering? How is it different than what's out there right now? And how is it going to make life easier to small business, mom and pop's place, individuals, and larger companies?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, definitely appreciate you bringing that up and how we work on that. So as I said, I firmly believe in these principles, and that's where I say, what we do is not something that I'm just promoting something that I don't believe in. It's something I use and practice on an ongoing basis. And, I joke around with my wife, she's gotten her credit card stolen 6 or 7 different times. And I've had the same debit card, same number for years, because I've taken these steps and to protect myself. And I, try to get her on board with everything. So it's, it's a challenge even at the home front. But what we work on is we work on that kind of that security key driven part where it's that removal, that hardware and software. So we have ShredCube, which is it's an external device that plugs into a computer. We're working on some other different, we talk about so many different areas that these data are stored. So we're going to continue to work on that until we try to get as many of those as possible. Now we got a good device that plugs into computers, has that software loaded on there, has the hardware component so it disconnects, so it's not downloading from the internet. It's not having a lot of those different ways of attaching other softwares to it, so it's allowing for that authentication process in. So we're going through and allowing those sanitization tools to be able to be readily accessible and super easy for just everyday people to use. So it's not so arduous, and you don't have to be IT level professional on every given time to minimize your risk.
Right.
Because the IT guys, like we said, they're scrambling right now on all sorts of different fronts. So it's there's kind of that, you need to kind of protect yourself a little bit too, and then trust the IT guys that are out there doing the big stuff. Let's give them a helping hand. And, if we want to go towards military tactics, right, we got centralized command structures, during certain battlefields and everything like that. But then when you start getting it chaotic, you have to switch to decentralized command structures that allow for the individuals to operate and work within set parameters, so they can kind of take care of themselves and verify things, and that kind of helps mitigate the risk for everybody. And that's kind of the way that we're approaching data sanitization, is that hey, let's let the IT guys take care of their big picture, and then let's kind of help get the individuals and the individual consumers, people in our own organization, give them the tools necessary to help support those IT guys to be able to, do the individual deletion on an ongoing basis and not wait till we're just getting a bulk data wipe, because that's really what's out there right now. It's bulk data wiping based on timing or based on when we're getting rid of something. That's about the only tools. There's not a whole lot of ongoing basis data wiping and securely deleting it. There's a few organizations, we know the military's got those tools, but the general consumers don't have those as easily and readily accessible unless they're on an IT level. But yeah, when we start getting into that, that's what our device is working on. Super simple. We configured it to where it's so easy to use that somebody that's as old as an 80-year-old guy that only checks his emails and jumps on for some news, it's so simple that even he can use it. We would compare it similar to to that home office shredder, that it's just stick it in, hit the button, you're good to go, and it's going to shred it all, and it's gone. And you're not having to deal with chasing all those different things down and trying to figure out what those registry and those log files we were talking about that are hidden, those hidden cache files. Like, it's just you hit a couple buttons on the software of what you're trying to do, and it will kind of run through and do what it needs to do for you. And when you're done, you unplug it, and there's nothing left behind that, there's no way for it to trace how it went through there. The device and the software come with you. And it can switch between different computers too. So that's where the big part of it comes from, is that we're trying to mirror some of those new technologies and some of those older technologies that are kind of tried and true, and trying to blend them into a creative way about dealing with data sanitization and data shredding, so that way it's secure as it possibly can make it. And as I said, making it as simple and easy for everyday consumers to be able to use these tools to help them mitigate their risks. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
So if I hear, if I heard this right, it's a hardware device that you can plug in to like a USB on your computer, and then when you're working on a document or file, and then you want to securely delete it and have that assurance that it's gone from all over it in your system, and you just drag and drop it onto this device, or you just is there like a software? Take me through like how does it work, and maybe we'll just insert some kind of a video in here, some kind of graphic to kind of visualize that, but just kind of describe how that works like day to day when someone uses it.
Yeah, I mean, I said that we made it as simple as possible. So if you can check an email and attach a file, you can do data sanitization. So it's you got the physical device. We'll just stick with a USB instance right now. So we got it plugged into a USB port. That software is going to load and come up with just the standard UX that for the software on your screen, so people are familiar with. And then yes, they can drag and drop a file onto there. Or they can click like they were doing an email, do an attachment, select multiple files, and then there's just a couple buttons to select, if it's just that individual file that you want to go ahead and data sanitize, or if you want to go a little bit more in depth, because this is something more secure, like we'll just say like a mortgage document or something like that, then you can hit like a locate all copies, which is going to run through everything that's connected to that computer, your external hard drives. If you're running off of Mac, it's going to check your time machine as well too, make sure that it's catching all those different type of files, and then it's going to sanitize those as well too. So it's pretty simple, and again, you don't have to find it, the software does it for you, and then runs through a couple command prompts. Just make sure that you're confirming that you want to sanitize these, because there is no recovery. And then after it's done, you unplug it and you're all set to go. There's nothing to do after that. So super simple.
Nice, I like it. The simplicity is going to be key. I like the fact that it's kind of like at the edge of the enterprise's network, which is on your system. It's you brought up a very interesting and important point that if you're doing this, let's say data sanitization in bulk by some kind of policy that the company is instituting across the network, across all of its computers, that's something that's time based once in a while and so on. This would be like an ongoing thing. You come in, you plug this thing in, and as you work, if you need to delete something, it's gone because you're doing it, and it's the end user that's doing it, and it's because it's so simple. It sounds like that then anybody can do it, and it's real time, and then your IT guys can focus on, like you said, those larger things, bigger projects that they have to work on, and instead of like trying to track things down and do things and deal with that, basically let the users empower the users to delete their the files and kind of manage it at the endpoints. So that's pretty cool. Where can how much is this? Why is it $1 million? And when can I get it?
Yeah, so so right now we're retailing this at it's like $159, and the way that we're positioning this is that this first instance, and we may kind of change it a little bit, but for now we're sticking to $159. Comes with the device, comes with the preloaded software, and it's unlimited use. There's unlimited updates as we build the software out there within that platform. and it's a one-time purchase. Like this model's got no subscription to it, so it's, as I said, we're treating it very much like it was like an office shredder. You go to the office, you don't go to Office Depot and buy a new shredder every time you're trying to file, get a document. So we're trying to treat it very similar in that process. It just, you buy it, you own it, you can delete it, right? And then we have a few other different variations that we're coming out with here, that may be a little bit more subscription if you're starting to get into some of those advanced computer cloud services. That's what we're kind of working on there, because those are a lot more complex, a little bit more ongoing. So, there's going to be that kind of ever evolving, whereas just basic, laptop data shredding is pretty easy to do, and not a whole lot of complexity to it. So we can always kind of stay ahead of that a lot faster than we can some of these other things. So it's available now for purchase. You can get it on our website, and as I said, it's right out of the box, ready to go. There's no setup, there's no no major registry type things or having to get some 16-digit key that you have to set up. It's right out of the box. You plug it in, you're good to go. Right.
That's cool. And you mentioned something that I want to pull the thread on a little bit, which is what's in the future for you with this. I mean, now that there's a lot of stuff that's in the cloud, right? A lot of companies are literally outsourcing their stuff, and everything kind of lives in the cloud. What do you see? What do you see next for you, like version 2.0 or 3.0, to kind of deal with that aspect?
So we're starting to do some architecture and kind of digging into this and mapping a lot of different things out, working on some different programming to starting to get into these advanced things. So like, as I said, like cloud services, we know it's inevitable. I mean, you're going to use cloud services. There's a lot of good benefits from them because you have access to that data at any given time. So we're working on being able to integrate some of those different cloud services that are pretty prominent out on the market. That's a big one. We can see, like, we'll take Mac, for instance, and Apple. They're connecting a lot of their devices across all the different things you have. So your iPhone and your MacBook Air and your iPad are all interconnected through iCloud.
Right.
So to make sure that we can kind of reach out and touch all those at once is where we're trying to head with this, and making some good progress and kind of mapping that out. So as we're kind of continuing to work through the bugs, because obviously we don't want to put somebody in hands and promise you, hey, we got it, and it's not working. So we're being very cautious as we're getting it there, that we can deliver what we say we're going to deliver, because we've all seen those different softwares and those different companies. Oh yeah, we got it, it's deleted, and then it's not. So we don't want to be that company. We don't want to be those people that don't deliver what we promise. And when we launch it, it's gonna be legit to the best ability that we can, to make sure that it's getting every instance that we can think of, reaching out and touching all those different connectivities. We're getting into some different we're toying around with a couple different platforms. So like when we're talking about getting rid of computers, some people may not be as adverse to trying to deal with those on an ongoing basis. So we're looking at some different disposable type devices too, that you can get that one-time purchase, one-time use for when you're about to get rid of your computer or get rid of some different things, maybe a printer. So we're kind of digging into that from an R&D side of things, and we're making some pretty good headway on a few different inroads there. So hopefully we got some exciting things to launch and show people here in the future that are give people a lot of different tools and resources to work with.
Right. Well, Alex, thank you so much for being on the show, being the first one in this new segment, which is focusing on topics and things, physical, as opposed to talking about people. And for those of you who enjoyed this show, here's a link to or a website for ShredCube. So it's shredcube.com, and this is where you can learn a little bit more about what Alex was talking about to make your life easier. You can incorporate that in your business, and if you like what we've been doing over here, bringing in subject matter experts. This is a new segment on apodcast.com where we're going to be bringing in more subject matter experts and talking about things and specific topics that may be of interest to the audience. And give us a like, give us a share this podcast, and put comments in in there and let us know how you feel about it, and share it with others if you found this valuable. So thanks again for joining us. Alex, thank you so much for being on the show, and I appreciate it. And until next time, this is a podcast with interesting people, and this one is a podcast about interesting stuff and things. So peace out. See you next time. Apodcast.com. Listen, learn, and share.
Thanks for listening to a podcast with interesting people. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review or comment.
And support us by sharing our episodes on social media. We really appreciate it. And for more information, visit us at apodcast.com. Thanks.
Thank you.